What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Fantasy Files Podcast, the podcast that wastes hours of your life that you will never get back. We are your co-hosts, Spencer and Gabe, joined by the author of one of my favorite books of all time, James Maxey. We'll be hanging out with him and talking about his Bitterwood trilogy. I know it as the Dragon Age trilogy, so we'll have to talk about that. But his Bitterwood trilogy, specifically the third book, Dragon Seed, we will keep it spoiler-free until we get to the very end, where we will have a short spoiler discussion. So if you decide that you want to read the series, then you can stop there, or you can join us for some light spoilers later on. If you'd like to reach out to us, you can do so using the links in our description. We got Twitter, we got Discord, we got Patreon, where you can join and hang out with us before we start the actual show and get to see some behind-the-scenes stuff. You get to watch these episodes live as we record them, and weeks ahead of when YouTube gets them, and you can join in on the chat and all that good stuff. So definitely join our Patreon if you want to help support the podcast. And if you'd like some extra goodies as well. We'll also have James Maxey's links down there. I'll have the links to some of his books and his website. You can see there in his under his name, jamesmaxey.net. So I'll have all that linked down below if you'd like to check out more of his stuff or interact with him on Twitter or whatever. But without further ado, let's talk with James Maxey. Man, I'm actually so excited to talk to you. It's always, I'm sure it's weird for you when someone has like known who you are for like years and years and years, and you have no idea who they are. So yeah, I reached out on Twitter. I was just like scrolling Twitter one night, and I swear, you know, we've been doing this podcast for 5 years, and I swear I've looked you up before and haven't been able to find you. So I don't know what happened, but I was like scrolling Twitter, and all of a sudden you had posted something. It was some post that got a bunch of likes and stuff and showed up on my
follow back post where I was talking about. I only have successful posts if I'm complaining. So I was complaining about the following fellow authors who never followed me back, and now I was.
That's exactly what it was. You were saying, you're like, man, I feel like I follow all these people and they never follow me back, and that's kind of the hard part about Twitter is like, I don't know, some people are, you know, some people just don't follow anybody, and it's crazy. Like some people are like following 2 people, but they have like 100,000 people following them.
Yeah.
But
I can understand for like a certain level of celebrity,
sure,
you know, that you're going to be, you know, connected just to a couple of, you know,
right.
a couple of people. But, you know, it's often like an author that will have like, you know, 500 followers, you know.
Yeah.
All right, you can afford to follow me back here, dude.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. There's good things and bad things to Twitter for sure. Like it definitely kind of hosts a really cool community of authors, but then, you know, sometimes it's harder to kind of get into the community or to get people to follow you. We're having a hard time getting people to follow us right now. For some reason, we've been stagnant at 881 followers. And I have not been able to get it above that, and I don't know why. We have over 1,100 subscribers on YouTube, but I don't know. Everybody who's like, if you have Twitter and you're watching us on YouTube, go follow us on Twitter so we can get those numbers up a bit.
They should be even.
Yeah, they should be even. They should be exactly even.
So the thing that here's a little secret, and I really believe it's true. I did that post. So I had been like 800 followers for forever when I posted frustration about about the authors not following me back. Yeah, and that's the one where I wound up in like the course of a week picking up 700 followers. You know, I practically doubled my followers based on that. And then I
so maybe I should complain more.
I wrote a post commenting on it saying, well, since this whole follow back thing the irony is, I'm having trouble. I'm getting followers so quickly. It's taking me a time to vet and figure out which of you are real and which are your face.
Right.
And so I once again typed the phrase "follow back," and that post suddenly got, like 10,000 views. And so then I was like, is that the magic word? Is that the summoning spell? Just type follow back, follow back, follow back. And that one wound up getting like 4,000 or 5,000 views on it. So I saw diminishing returns, but apparently the phrase "follow back" does something to boost you in the algorithm.
Yeah, I'm sure it's some. What's that?
Notes.
Yeah, take notes.
Take notes.
Take notes. Yeah, no, I still haven't hit 2,000, but yeah, I jumped from under 1,000 to closing in on 1,700 in just a very short period because I went on that follow back rant.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna have to try this and see if I can hit the algorithm just right.
It's a perverse incentive that it rewards you for complaining about the app.
Right. Yeah. This is like what's the term? Negative reinforcement, like.
Yeah. So if I go on and whine, I feel like on my Twitter feed, I write pretty helpful tips about how to sell books, tips about writing, but most of the positive stuff I'm just shouting into the wind. And then I'll come in with some random gripe about something, and it's like, yes, preach. We want to hear the negative stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm cursing having a fairly happy life.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, God forbid. So yeah, I had been just like scrolling Twitter, and I'll tell you more about this in a minute because I think it's interesting, but I have read Dragonseed literally dozens of times. Like, I would not be able to count the amount of times I've read this one book by you, and so I know your name like very well, and I'm scrolling Twitter and I see this rant, and at first I was like, oh yeah, that's funny, I can relate to that, and then I look up and I'm like, wait, does that say James Maxey? Is that who I think it is? And I went to your profile and I saw like the Bitterwood Trilogy, and I was like, oh my God. I'm like, I have to get him on the podcast. And with that, I got to tell you like how I'm so familiar with this book, because like I've said, I've read it so many times. And this won't be too much of a surprise to our audience because I've talked about it quite a bit on the podcast. But during my teenage years and early to mid 20s, I was dealing with a lot of addiction issues and kind of went through like this whole thing this period of my life. And now I've been clean for 7 years. But during that time, I think I was like 20 or 21, and I had ended up in jail for over a month. And I remember we had like this little cart of books. A lot of them were like romance and just all these other books. I think that's where I read Dean Koontz's Soul Survivor for the first time. It's where I read the Dresden Files for the first time. They had the 9th book of Dresden Files. So that was my introduction to that. And then one of the other ones I specifically remember, there was a bunch of us in a room, and they were having us. There was like two cells that held like 15 people each, and they were having us like switch rooms. And on the way out, a guy that was coming from the other room had Dragonseed, and he was like walking through the door, and I had like a book, and he turned to me, he's like, hey, I've read this a couple times now. He's like, do you want to read this? I was like, oh sure. I'm like, it has it was this cover.
Okay. Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that looks kind of cool just from the cover. And so I took it from him, and this is like my 3rd day in there. And I spent the next like month and a half rereading Dragonseed over and over, as well as Proven Guilty, the 9th book of the Dresden Files. And I just absolutely fell in love with it. I know it's such a weird way to, such a weird way for someone to find your book. But that's what happened. And then, I got out and lived my life for a while. And then eventually I got into a 6-month treatment program where I was like at this place for 6 months, and I had bought Dragon Seed on the outside and brought it in with me and reread it more while I was in treatment. So yeah, I've read Dragon Seed a lot of times. I know that's probably such a weird way for someone to like be a fan of yours, but
I had this is a similar situation. I had someone in Raleigh. I was at a show, and he walked past the table, and he just like did a double take and came back, and he's like, I can't remember which book he had read, but I was on a submarine, and we were like on the submarine, we were underwater for, like months.
Yeah.
And so, yours was one of like 12 books that they had.
That's cool.
and I read that book so many times. And so I just, it's
that's so great.
A marketing strategy for all.
Yeah, get it into the jails, get it into the military, send it all those places.
Yeah.
Yep.
I
Yeah.
can, certainly I see the power of the
Yeah.
audience, literally.
Right, exactly, yeah. Luckily, I've never needed to go back, but I am, as much as that time sucked, I'm really glad that it introduced me to the Dresden Files and Dragon Seed, because this is just like one of my like favorite books ever. Everything about it just completely captivates me. Everything that you know, and we're not doing spoilers in this early part or anything, but what you learn about the magic and like how that's actually working in this world. You get Shay's point of view where he's like, it's magic, and then you have Jandra telling him this whole time, like, it's not like really magic, and he's like, what are you talking about? And just the way that like slowly gets revealed. Hey Nova, what's up? Welcome in. We were just talking about my time in jail and finding his book. So yeah, I thought that was extremely interesting, and it was the first time that I had ever seen anything like that. And you were before we started the podcast proper, you had said, so you started with the 3rd book. Like, how was that for like a new reader? And it's really interesting because when I read this in jail, I had no idea that it was the 3rd book in a series. The front just says a novel of the Dragon Age.
Yeah.
And so I thought it was either like, a spin-off or like a one-off or just like a single book. And so I had no frame of reference for it being like in a series. And, one of my notes here is that I think that speaks really highly to your writing, that I was able to go in to this book that I had no idea was in a series, and let alone the last book in a series, and get everything I needed. Like, the first time I read it, I understood exactly who Bitterwood was. I understood exactly like what was going on with the dragon. I'm sure there was details I was missing, but I was able to understand everything as it goes along. And one of the kind of topics of fantasy writing, or really any writing, that I'm really interested in is the idiot rule. You have a character who doesn't know anything, who other people are able to explain things to, and then it informs the audience and makes this other character feel like an idiot, and it doesn't make the reader feel like the idiot, right?
Right.
And so Shay is kind of used as this idiot rule, where he is, he's coming out of his own kind of captivity, and he's learning about the nuances of the world and stuff, and so he's kind of able to tell the
and that's that was definitely by design. So it's a product of its era. So even to the Dragon Age, whenever I sold Bitterwood to Solaris, it was probably early 2000, late 2005 probably, and at the time there was no Dragon Age game, and so
I thought these were novels from the game when I was first I was like, oh, Dragon Age, and I had never played the game, and so I assumed that these were like, because they have like World of Warcraft books and all sorts of stuff. I assumed that's what it was, and it wasn't until much later that I found out.
Coincidence that I had released a book about the Dragon Age that happened to come out right around the time the Dragon Age game was published.
Right.
But no overlap, just sequences names. So a funny side story on that, on the coincidental names. After I did Bitterwood, my publisher, when we were getting the second book plan, they were like, oh, basically, if you put the word dragon in a book title, it sells more books.
Sure. Yeah.
And and so I'm like, and so I went on to Amazon back then, and was just like typing dragon sword, dragon crown, just every noun I could think of after the word dragon, and it's just like,
right,
man, everything you can come up with has been done. And so the second book is called Dragon Forge. In Southern Virginia, in the mountains, there's a lot of places that are called Clifton Forge or some other forge, because there used to be the most famous one, a Valley Forge, or there used to be smelting work there. And so so I was like, oh, well, this is taking place at the smelting factory of the dragons. It's Dragon Forge. It makes a lot of sense. And so so we went ahead and we put out the book called Dragon Forge. And in the book, it's always two words: Dragon, capital F, Forge, with a space in between. And the publisher is like, "Oh, we're just going to put it out as one word. It just looks cooler."
Yeah.
So the same thing happened with Dragon Seed. No, we have a pattern now. It's always one word, so they just crammed it together. But the funny thing is, after all that work I did, the week that Dragon Forge was a new release, another publisher released a book called Dragon Forge. It was exactly the same. My main character in Dragon Forge was was named Graxen, Graxen, and the main character of the other Dragon Forge was called Graven, Graven.
No way!
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh my god! What a coincidence!
Just
that's wild.
The universe throwing stuff at you. And so when you contacted me and said, "Hey, Dragon Seed's my favorite novel," I was like,
that's why you were like, "Is this the other one?" Or
yeah, well, there's
better make sure it's my book.
Since I published Dragon Seed, over 10 years ago, there's been another book called Dragon Seed that's like, I believe, the game lit, which is kind of hot. Kind of a hot genre now, and so every now and then people will see Dragon Seed and will be like, "Oh, is that the game lit?" And it's like, no, just pure coincidence. So when you contacted me, I was thinking, this is probably about the other book, because usually the fact it was the third book in the series, usually when people contact me saying, I'm a huge fan because I read Bitterwood, the first book in the series, and so the fact that you singled out the third book felt suspicious, but now I understand the reason. And for what it's worth, I think it's the third book in that series is a much better book than the first book. So
yeah, that's funny. Yeah, when you asked me that, I was like, "Oh no, I'm sure." I'm like, I've been looking at your name on this cover for like years and years and years.
But you're talking about the idiot rule. So the nice thing about Shay, so the way publishing worked back then, I knew, it was coming out in traditional publishers, coming out in a bookstore, and the release schedule was like, every 18 months, back then, books could be dragged out.
Yeah.
And so when I was writing this, I'm like, I just, it wasn't as traditional as it is now to say book one of blah, 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 or book two of blah, blah, blah.
Right.
I knew it was going to hit the book stand just as its own thing. And so, I was like, I gotta write it in a way that the people who are familiar with the series aren't going to be too exhausted by the recapping of what went before, and yet at the same time, someone who just finds the book new is going to be able to pick it up and read it and feel like it's a complete book. Because to me, that's important to me. I've always been I was a huge fantasy reader, and I got annoyed by fantasy authors who would make me read 900 pages and not bother to properly start the book, picking up in the middle of action, and then they don't bother to properly finish the book. It's like, there's like, this is just the end. And so, I was really, I'll put up with that with a single issue of a comic book where I'm picked up, part 3 of a 4-part, story.
Right.
If I can invest 17 pages of that, but don't make me invest, 500 plus pages without bothering to properly start or properly end it. So,
right. Yeah.
So I don't have a lot of customer service rules for writers, but start your book and end your book is the, whatever.
Right.
Philosophies.
Yep. Yeah. What a bar. Yeah. I really felt like, Shay was a great introduction to the series, just being in his point of view. And
why he works is that, you're calling him an idiot character, and I think that's, proper name for that role, that type of character. But Shay himself is not an idiot.
No, yeah.
He's extremely well read. He's an intellectual, an idealist, and so, some idiot characters are just, you can't work with them. You have no reason to like them. Whereas with Shay, just from the first scene, you can instantly, admire his courage. You can admire his vision and his dream. He's very well spoken. You can articulate things. They can explain very complex things to him. I will say, this is not pitching spoilers. I have a series that follows Bitterwood called Dragon's Gate. It's a 3-book series, and Shay is one of the major characters in there.
Is he?
Yes.
Okay.
The funniest line Shay speaks in all my writing comes in the once you get into the.
Okay.
Oh, cool. That's awesome.
Are those in the works for Audible?
So eventually, yes. So last year I had big plans for audio a few years back, and but my mother got really sick and wound up being in a nursing home. She passed away in January. But I almost feel like I lost a year of my life to dealing with that. And then, I'm still, I put out 2 books last year, but one was a nonfiction book. Another was an anthology I edited. I basically didn't write anything new last year. And I also went into the year like, I'm going to record, several more audiobooks, get Jake to record those. And then, I just, every minute of my life, I was just, trying to get my mom into a nursing home that would take her that had an open bed.
Yeah.
Spending a lot of time, nights at her house. So yes, I hate to be making excuses, but I've lost that year, and now I feel like I'm racing. My focus is on actually getting some new books out. I haven't released a novel in over a year. So this year, my goal is to bulk up my novel catalog, get more novels out, and then I can look back into doing getting the audiobooks out. And I know I hate that I'm losing potential audiobook readers by not having all my stuff there, but since I'm now indie published, I have like a certain pool of time, money, focus, attention, and audio unfortunately gets shoved aside from time to time.
Yeah, for sure. I totally get that. Sometimes there's just things that happen in life that slow you way down. We as a podcast have been dealing with basically from like January to like very recently, like a couple weeks ago. I just like hadn't really been editing much of anything because life just got crazy, like multiple things happening. And so like I'm way behind on that. And I'm like, man, it's crazy how just like a couple like life changes can completely mess up like like as they say, shit flows downhill. And it's just like you get to a point where it's just like everything just affects everything else, and yeah, it sucks.
Yeah, and so when I went indie, you know, I started traditionally published. The book that you held up came out through Solaris. I did 6 books through Solaris. I had a couple of other novels that came out through small presses, but I'm old enough that when Solaris bought Bitterwood, they hadn't bought the ebook rights because ebooks weren't a thing at the time that my contract was being signed. And so I started, you know, they came back to me and were like, hey, we'll give you, you know, 12% royalties on your ebooks or on your for ebooks. And Amazon at the very same time was like, hey, you can self-publish ebooks for 70% royalties. And I'm like, 70 is a bigger number than 12.
Right. Yeah. But then you're also doing all the marketing and all the everything else.
So I went into indie by 2015. I jumped all in.
Oh, wow.
And now though, I've got a catalog of like 30 books, and maintaining that catalog and keeping it sold and keeping, you know, revenue streaming in, you know, it's like, oh, I now see why people have publishers for this, you know, because it's, you know, I spend, you know, in a typical year of my time, you know, I'm now spending 75% promoting and selling and working on old stuff, you know, and you know, it's a very small percentage of my time that I have left for writing and producing the new stuff. And so definitely, if you go indie, you know, realize that your fate may one day be that you are making a living at it, but have 30 books that you have to constantly keep in the public side.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, for sure. Well, yeah, I'm gonna have to check out Dragon's Gate. Lately, especially the past few years, Gabe and I have really only been reading through Audible, just because we can like listen at work and stuff. But I mean, if it's got Bitterwood and Shay in it, I'm gonna have to get the physical and slowly but surely read them. Physically, because that's all. I've always wondered what happened to those characters afterwards.
So this isn't. I'll tell you the a bit about the scene in Dragon's Gate. So since I don't want to, you know, I know this is a spoiler free zone, but at this point the books are over 10 years old, and so you know,
you can spoil whatever you want to.
This is you know, it looks like a fantasy universe, but it's actually a science fiction universe. It's our universe in the future. And so Shay, in the course of the next series, winds up in this high tech battle suit, kind of like, you know, an Iron Man, you know, style suit, and it has an AI in it named Isis that's like giving him helpful advice, and so at one point they're going to have to fly over water, and he's like really nervous because if they, you know, run out, you know, and have to make a landing, you know, he's in this, you know, armor that's just going to sink like stone, and the AI says, "Oh no, there's an inflatable dinghy in the rear compartment," and he's like, "I don't, you know." What do you mean, an inflatable dinghy?
Yeah.
And someone else is like, a dinghy's a boat. He said, I know it's a boat. And she says it's but how do you put a boat into this suit? And the guy says she's just saying you've got a boat in your butt. And so he like pauses, afterwards explained that the boat is cloth and we're blown up, and he's like, he has seen all this high tech, all this magic, all this, stuff that is far beyond his comprehension. And he's willing to deal with the fact that, that there's this city of Atlantis, and that, he's
right.
goddesses and angels. But the idea that you can make a boat out of cloth is just like completely contrary to everything he understands about reality.
Right.
And he just can't process it. That's the point that breaks him.
That's so great. I love that. It's fantastic. We got a comment from Nova here. One of the hard things about jail is not being able to get the whole series. Had a similar experience as soon as I got out. I started reading the rest of the author's books. This is tough, for sure. There was several books in there where, Dresden Files, right? I started on the 9th book of the Dresden Files.
Yeah,
and as soon as I got out, I read everything else. And I think with Dragonseed, the reason, I need to go back and read the first two. I think the only reason I didn't was because I liked Shay so much, and my views of reading fantasy have changed a lot over the years, but back then I was like, well, if Shay isn't in the first couple books, then I don't want to, I just want to keep rereading Dragonseed. But now my horizons on reading have expanded a lot more, and I would love to go back and read them, especially with the different narrator, because I think I tried, the Dragonseed has a different narrator than the previous two, right?
Well, the one before it's the same, Dragon Forge, it's the same Eric Chansey,
okay.
But I've since had the first book re-recorded by Jay Curry, and Jake will eventually have the full series recorded.
Okay.
Cool.
So he's already recorded the first book and the prequel novel, Dawn of Dragons. And so now I'm at this point of, do I have him go back and record those two middle books, or do I have him record Dragon's Gate? Where do I, what am I going to point him to next?
Yeah. Ooh.
And it's, it's also, an investment of money, and
right.
At the beginning of the year, I was feeling pretty good about money, and then I feel like the last 2 months, the economy, every time I'm thinking, do I want to spend a lot of my money here? And it's like,
tell me about it. it. I just got the most basic work truck you can possibly buy, and it's costing me $570 a month with payments and insurance. And I'm like, that hurts. That hurts quite a bit.
That's crazy.
So this is the first year, ever since I became an indie author, except for the COVID year, which was a disaster for me.
Yeah.
I go to these big convention halls and I sell books by hand. Last year I did 30 shows. And this year, except for I've had one show that's been a repeat where I actually grew, and everything else has been falling.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been, I really feel like, there's this, people are just being very cautious with their money now. And so now that's, and then but then if I don't record the audiobooks, then of course no one can download them. So I'm in this.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Nova asks, how long have you been writing, James? Do you want to talk about that and kind of where you got kind of your general journey so far?
Yeah. So I started, I was writing in high school and in college, but I didn't really break into the industry until I guess I got some short stories published when I was in my 30s, and my first book was a superhero novel called Nobody Gets the Girl, and I was 40 years old before I walked into a Barnes & Noble and finally saw a book on the bookshelf. So I'm 61 now, so for over 20 years, I've been had at least one book in print at the moment. Now that I'm indie, everything I write stays in print. But the reason I'm a writer is whenever I was a kid, I just was addicted to comic books. I mean, I just read every comic book I could. And my mom told me if I kept reading so many comic books, it was going to damage my brain. And she was right. And I grew up to be completely unfit for decent work. I'm no good sitting behind, a desk working for someone else. I'm not going to go out and dig ditches. No offense to anyone who does that for a living, but I basically have come up with this grift where I daydream, type it out, and convince people to give me money for it. And it's a pretty good grift.
Yeah.
There's more secure ways to make a living in the world. I'm sure that I am out-earned on a monthly basis by line cooks at McDonald's sometimes, but they come with, and they have health, and they might have health insurance, but they don't get random fan letters. So that's
right.
One of the nice things about being a writer, as long as I've been at it, is that fan interaction is really kind of hard to let go.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome. Yeah. That's super cool. Have you noticed what have been the biggest differences going from traditional publishing to indie publishing? Because we talk to a lot of indie authors and stuff, and a lot of our favorite books are written by indie authors. But I think we've talked to very few that have gone from traditional to indie.
So I tell people that you gotta. A lot of it is just coming down to your mindset. A lot of traditional published authors are like, oh well, my publisher is paying me to write. And I'm like, no, you got to flip that mindset. They aren't paying you to write. You are paying them like 93% of the revenue from your book, is being paid for them to print it and distribute it and edit it and promote it, do the covers. And all these are valuable services. It might be worth 93% to you. But once you're indie, all those tasks that you were paying someone else to do with your royalties, you're now got to be in charge of for yourself. But the end of the goal is, you get to keep the money that's flowing to you. I've got let me show you this. So at my shows this year, I've introduced this $100 Bitterwood illustrated saga. So it's all the books of the Bitterwood illustrated, or Bitterwood saga collected.
I want that. Where do I get that?
I can. I'd prefer to sell it to you directly.
Okay.
Link. But yeah, so Kevin Spain has done the illustrations in it.
Cool.
That's what Bitterwood looks like to him.
Wait, I was on a different tab. Show me Bitterwood.
Sorry. Yeah, I can show you the Bitterwood again. That's Bitterwood.
Oh, sick. That's awesome.
Here, I've actually got a picture of Shay as well.
No shit. Oh my God. I swear.
I mentioned Shay in the armor, and so Shay is on the back cover of the Dragon's Gate saga, with his armor. And
cool.
Sick.
Or his wings. No spoiler as to what the wings are actually. But yeah, so Kevin is a great artist. So anyway, I was going to say I sell this for $100 at shows, and I've been very surprised at how little price resistance I'm getting for that. But,
for sure.
I'm keeping $70 out of every one I sell for $100.
Yeah.
So compared to back in the days when I was going to a Barnes and Noble and, selling my, $8 paperback, of which, I was wound up getting like 50 cent out of each sale. And then I wasn't getting it because I had already been paid up front for an advance,
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, the indie world, is, you sell far fewer books than you did in traditional publishing, but you have you
get to keep more of it.
You get to keep, you get to keep enough that you can, form kind of a living wage out of it.
Right.
So yeah, this is Bitterwood. The Bitterwood saga, since it's sold, has done as well as it has as a $100 hardcover. I'll have 2 more the deluxe hardcovers out. I've already signed the contracts for them. So
cool.
Awesome.
Is that so that illustrated edition, is that the first book of Bitterwood, or is that all?
Four books,
is that?
So it's got Bitterwood, Dragonforge, Dragonseed, and Dawn of Dragons. It's got a prequel short story and then a bonus short story at the end. The high-tech city of Atlantis that plays such a prominent role in the course of the Bitterwood saga was first introduced in a short story that was published way back in 2001, and so I include that story in the collection because it's sort of the touchstone that generated the rest of my writing career.
Yeah. $100 for that is a fantastic deal because Gabe and I both got the illustrated edition of Kingstark Tidings, and it's just the first book, and that was 100. I think that was like 130 each. Yeah. And then we got, I have the illustrated trilogy of Threadlight, and I think that was like 150 or so.
People are shocked. Some people are shocked by saying, I sell those for $100, and other people, but we've entered an age. So like I just did a convention in Indianapolis, and the parking there was $45 a day, and so I wound up paying like $180 just to park and have the honor to go and sell my stuff. And so, but the reality is that you can easily go out with 2 people to a not the top level premium steakhouse, just to like a pretty mid-sized brew pub, and if you get a couple of mixed drinks and a couple of desserts, you could easily wind up spending $100 on a meal. So asking someone to pay for almost 500,000 words of fiction and the gorgeous illustrations, it's something that's going to just look impressive on your shelf. It's really not that big of an ask. I have two friends who are authors that had been selling $100 hardcovers, and I had watched them sell them again and again, and I'm like, man, I wish I had a $100 hardcover. And I'm like, hold on, wait, I'm the publisher for this.
Right? Yeah.
If I don't have one, that is all on me. So
right, for sure. Yeah, I'm loving the indie scene is really popping off with the illustrated and deluxe editions and stuff. All my reading is mostly through Audible, but I like to get the pretty editions to put on my my bookshelf back here. And
this is where indie can differentiate itself. So indie 15 years ago, 20 years ago, their differentiation was that they were cheap. You could put out a 99-cent ebook, or even make a perma-free first book in a series, and you could put out books fast. So rapid release. There are people who are putting out a dozen books a year. Short, not terribly well edited, but just feeding. Once you get a fan base, you just get those books out there, and they're a little fast, a little sloppy, but kind of like a modern pulp. Stuff like The Shadow, or other things that are still very famous today, we're come from an era where a magazine had to go out every month, and people had to write 60,000 word stories, in the course of a month to get them out. So for a while there was that era of modern pulp, but that worked when Amazon had 700,000 ebooks, and now they don't even tell you how many ebooks they've got, available, because it's, the last time they counted, it was like 43 million. And that figure dates from 5 years ago.
Wow.
And so, there are probably literally, a minimum of 100 million books out there available as an ebook format. And just being cheap is not, just because you have a book for free or for 99 cents is no longer a good way to get people to find you. There's so much clutter and so much noise. Spend your time, put out pretty books. I'm not a rapid releaser. I make sure that, everything that goes out that has my name on it is, a pretty high quality, something that people are going to sit down after they're done with it and feel like, wow, I've got, this book has changed me in some
Yeah.
in some way. I know that sounds pretentious, but I don't want to release just junk food books. I'm trying to release
Absolutely.
some books that the in Dragon Seed, the tension between the passion of the religious fanatics and then the sensibility of the team rational of Shea and Burke, and just I feel like that is a real tension where sometimes the smartest people with the best intentions get caught up and aren't willing to take the risk that the less intelligent, more fanatic people have the boldness and the confidence to go out and remake the world. And so I like to think that there's people can come out of this with finding parallels in that book.
Well, what's the thing they say, James? I don't know if you've read the Dresden Files by Jim Butcher, but what's the thing that Harry Dresden says all the time? It's true evil is rarely scary. It's the true stupid that is far scarier. He says something like that, where he's like, evil isn't that scary. Like, you can defeat evil. It's the stupid that really causes issues.
Yeah, I haven't read the Dresden Files.
Oh, you should.
The last book I released that I wrote was a nonfiction book called 13 Dooms. And I go through 13 different scenarios that humanity could go extinct in ever. And I have climate change, I got nuclear war, alien invasion, and then I have 2 matching chapters of artificial intelligence and natural stupidity.
Yeah, natural stupidity. Yeah.
Because every year I've been alive, the common refrain is, "Oh, people are getting dumber and dumber as our machines do more of our thinking for us." We're getting dumber and dumber.
Well, I think that's what I liked so much. Not to spoil too much, but that's what I liked so much about Dragon Seed is it explores. We were talking earlier about this perception of technology where Shea sees it as magic, and I think that's a really interesting idea to explore, especially when you look at the religious fanatics who are when there's a certain people that come back to the town and they have wings and the religious fanatics think that they're angels or that they're dead or whatever. And it's oh yeah, I guess in a primitive way, if you saw somebody flying, you would think, oh, maybe they're a spirit ascending to heaven, or maybe in, from this kind of olden days viewpoint, you perceive these things as supernatural. And then also the I really liked the idea of exploring like unbridled altruism, where like everybody is provided for, everybody has everything they need. They never really need to think about anything because the AI tells them like how to do things, and then it does it for them. And I find that subject so fascinating, and I wonder if you've ever read Scythe by Neil Shusterman. It came out way after, way after Dragonseed, but it does the same thing. I think you would like it a lot. Like I think like it's very much in the same vein where people in the future they decided to get rid of their government, and they have this AI that runs everything, and it gives people whatever they want. It helps them like, you know, instant food, instant like solved all of the world's problems, everything. But as soon as the AI is taken away, nobody knows how to do anything. They don't know how to like stitch the hole in their shirt, or they don't, or their jeans or whatever. Like they don't know how to cook anything. They don't know how to, because it's done everything for them. And you know, it's when if and when the AI goes away, it's like a really like terrifying thing, because nobody understands how to live in general. And even in Scythe, I thought it was really funny when I was doing this reread. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot that was a thing. But in Scythe, they actually have like people will go to the top of tall buildings and jump off, and they call it splatting, because it just like instantly like revives them. And then when I was reading Dragonseed, I was like, oh yeah, that's a thing.
That's that was, I mentioned, you know, that I reprint a short story in that illustrated edition. And the short story I'd published back in 2001 was called Empire of Dreams and Miracles. And it was about this AI Atlantis that, you know, had decided it was going to fix the world. And people were basically living in paradise. But when you can't die, you know, you're instantly resurrected for anything fatal that happens to you. You know, it kind of deranges you. And, you know, so people, you know, there, instead of playing video games, they actually run around shooting each other and stabbing each other, you know, just, you know, real life, you know, gladiatorial, assassin style combat, because there are no consequences, you know, you know, you're going to be reset, you know. And so, in Dragonseed, the spoiler, but people are, you know, throwing themselves off tall buildings just because they can't, you know. It's just
it's fun.
That few minutes of feeling, you know, of actually feeling
alive,
you know, and then the splat, but then you're alive again, so a lot of that's been a pretty constant exploration throughout my writing, is the so, you know, I love technology, I love science, I love everything geeky, but at the same time, we are getting so increasingly separated from nature and from our own nature, you know, that you know, we are so reliant on machines to keep us, you know, in comfort and safety and health and good health, and you know, we're, you know, it's, you know, are we becoming? Is this making us a little less human? Does it, you know, does it change?
Well, even nowadays with just Google, like I find myself doing it all the time. If I need to know how to do something, I go to Google or I go to YouTube, and far less often am I calling one of my relatives to be like, hey, how did you cook that, you know, meatloaf you used to make or whatever. Now I just go to Google and I'm like, how to make the best meatloaf, and there's a dozen videos showing me how to do it. And so there's much less of that like tradition getting passed down like through a family, and instead just going to the internet to kind of click in and you know, have the internet tell me how to do it.
The ease with which information is acquired these days, you know, is robbed of its value. The you know, I used to read just science books, any popular science book that would come out, was just kind of like you'll find a lot of science under my science fiction, and it's because in the 80s and 90s, I was reading Carl Sagan and Stephen Jay Gould, and other Richard Dawkins, other. If it was like a hit book about something scientific, I was reading it, and learning about physics and genetics and everything, and it took up a lot of time. And now I have this. I'll get to a point. I'm like, oh, I've got an idea. What about this? And it's like, I Google it. It's like, oh, here's information that I once would have spent like 6 months, going through various books to get an understanding. And now, the computer has just explained to me how it works in 30 seconds, and I'm going to put it into a book and then forget. I don't have that investment in the fact anymore. So we are. The phone, maybe phone numbers, but I don't. There was a time when I had to memorize. I had like 25 phone numbers in my head for all my. Now my phone knows the phone numbers of the people I need to call, and if you were to tie me down and waterboard me and try to get my wife's phone number out of me, or her cell phone number, I'd be like, there's a 4. I think the second number is a 5. It's like, it's like, no.
Well, the only reason I know my mom's phone number is because it's been the same number since I was a little kid, and maybe Gabe doesn't remember a time before cell phones. He's a little bit younger than me, but yeah, I would have to like memorize her number, and then if I was at a friend's house, use their landline to like call my mom if I needed to. Do you?
I was around for that.
Okay, good.
You're not that much older than me.
Yeah, it's not that big. Every now and then there's like a big generational difference, but I think for the most part, Gabe and I remember a lot of the.
Yeah, I remember having a Razor flip phone and just gotten a Razor in 5th grade.
So I mentioned my first book was a superhero novel called Nobody Gets the Girl, and it, I wrote it in the year 2000. It hit bookstores in 2003. And it's still a really good read. I really think you should listen to an audio. It's plays a lot of some fun superhero tropes. But whenever I'm getting ready to release an omnibus edition that will include all 3 novels, and I'm going to throw in some bonus content. And it's like, it just feels weird now to read a book where it's set in the modern world, but no one uses their cell phone.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It's like, this seems like a situation where, now it's like, why didn't he pull out his phone and call somebody?
Yeah, exactly.
And, it's just like, wow, that is from such an ancient time. I've got a short story that's, really one of my favorite short stories ever written. It's called Perhaps the Snail. And part of it is there's this fangirl, she's like 16 and she's so obsessed with this rock musician. And part of the joke in the story is that no one knows what the lyrics to this guy's songs are because he mumbles everything so badly. And so there's like, she's talking with her friend about what the lyrics really mean, and the girl's like, no, it means this, and that she's actually saying this, and today it's like, if you want the lyrics of a song, the singer's mumbling, if you're playing your streamer, your device, you can look down, you can see the lyrics, popping up in real time. And so, this is a story set in the future, and yet there's still people who don't know the lyrics to their favorite songs. And it's
my mom and I were just talking about this recently, where she's like, yeah, when I was in high school in like the 70s or whatever, like she's like, if there wasn't like the lyrics printed on the back of the, like, not disc. What am I trying to say?
Yeah, the CD
the
or
record.
the record.
Yeah, the record. Yeah. If they're not printed on the back of the record, then you just don't know what the lyrics are for sure. Like you just don't. And she's like, there was, you know, generations where like nobody really knew, and then, you know, fairly recently when the internet came around and all the lyrics are online, now you can see it all. And there's been so many songs where, you know, even growing up, I had the lyrics like completely wrong. And then in the past, like 10 to 12 years or something, I picked up the ukulele and started learning songs on that. And every now and then I'll be like, oh, I want to learn how to play this song, and go online and be like, oh, that was not the lyric that I thought it was at all. Like, not even close.
Yeah, no, you know, in the 80s, early 90s, I was a huge REM fan, but they were notoriously, you know, their lyrics were notoriously impenetrable. And then, you know,
oh yeah,
a few years back, suddenly all their lyrics are there, and you know, I was like, gosh, I don't like REM anymore. All those things I thought they were saying some special secret message in their lyrics that, you know, was really resonating with me was a pure Rorschach test. You know, I was completely reading into it. Messages weren't there.
I mean, even thinking about like the end of the world as we know it, there's that part where he goes really fast, like da-na-na-na-na, 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 it's the end, and it's like I have no idea what he was saying in that part.
Yeah, so yeah, it's sometimes finding out, you know, the stuff, you know, it was better in your fantasy than it is in the reality.
For sure. Noah says, I remember recording songs off the radio and we'd write the lyrics that we thought were right on a paper for the cassette tape. I remember doing this too, like sitting down and like listening to a song and having to like quickly like write the lyrics as fast as I could, because there was just nothing to like copy them from. Well, like you just had to listen to the song and write them down.
So most of the lyrics that you're going to see online are wrong. So to get around copyright, a lot of places like Genius Lyrics or whatever, you know, aren't really publishing the sheet music lyrics. They're publishing what people upload as they think the lyrics are. And so, you know, you'll go on to some and you'll be like, is that really the lyric? I feel like they're, you know, they've bungled it. And then you go do a deeper dive and go to like the website for the artists themselves, and there's sometimes a lyric tab. You'll go and say, okay, no, the lyrics Google was offering me are completely off.
Well, here's a really good example. So Green Day's Good Riddance, Google tells me, so take the photographs and still frames in your mind, hang it on a shelf in good health and good time. And I swear to God that it's so take the photographs and still pretend you're mine. And I cannot get over that. I'm like, no, it's the one that I've always, and I've seen it like printed in different ways. I've seen like lyrics printed out that are like still pretend you're mine, and then like this one just off of Google says still frames in your mind. And so I guess we'll just never know.
yeah, they're avoiding the copyright by not having them accurate. So yeah, you can. Yeah, that said, you can usually find the official lyrics on the band site now,
right?
And it's for most of my life, this would have been just this magical, wonderful technology, but now I found that it is, you know, taken away some of the joy of pondering what, you know, of listening to a song 100 times and trying every possible variation of words you can form from the grunts of the
there's a kind of like magic in that, right? There's like a little bit of a journey you go on to like try to figure out the lyrics and how they resonate with you.
Twice, now you look it up and it's like, oh yeah. So yeah, the song loses its specialness. The thing that I mentioned, I'm into comic books. The same is true with graphic novels now. You know, I used to read something, I would go through long boxes at flea markets and comic book shops, and I would find, like issue 117 and issue 120 and then issue 122, and would have to, like, it might take me 3 years of searching to put together, a story arc and finally have the full story. And all this time I'm just reading little segments and, getting, kind of like, what am I missing, and now everything's in a graphic novel. And it's like, I no longer feel any pressure to go looking for single issues.
Right.
Anything that is halfway decent is going to be collected. And it's just, all the urgency and the search and the hunt function that used to be there has been stripped away. So,
well, this is why I love used bookstores. I go to used bookstores all the time because I could order whatever I want online, but there's a certain kind of fun in going to the used bookstore and being like, oh, I hope they have, the whatever book of the Dresden Files or, whatever. And kind of going there like week after week, hoping that somebody turns in this book that you've been looking for. And there's fun to that for sure.
Yeah, I read a lot of classic novels. I run a book club for my library called First Monday Classics that are the first of each month. We are discussing the classics like Moby Dick or War and Peace or Les Miserables. Just big headline books that everybody has heard of, but not everybody has read. There's so many of these where I haven't read them. But a lot of my deciding what I'm going to be, what the book club will be reading next year is me going to a used bookstore or a library sale and like, oh, here's this book,
right.
And I'm like, all right, let's do this book because I happen to have a copy of it.
Great. Well, I wanna go on to I want to eventually get to some spoilers, but I have a couple questions from Dragon Seed just in a general sense, or not really questions, but I guess just like topics. One of the characters that really drew me in is Anza, and I think she's such an interesting character. I was so fascinated by this idea that since she can't talk, if you think about like your inner monologue, right? And I think like, what if somebody was deaf or blind or whatever? Like, would they still have the same inner monologue that the rest of us have? And I don't really know the answer to that question, but I think the exploration of Anza as a character is so interesting because she's never been able to talk, and so she doesn't really have a way to literally and figuratively like voice her ideas or her thoughts. Everything that she thinks, everything that kind of goes through is translated by motion, even in the way she's doing like sign language and stuff, and so everything is very motion based, and because of that she's extremely familiar with how her body moves. Like, she is very like intimately familiar with how much momentum she needs for like a certain attack or movement. I just picture her being like a very graceful person in general, just very, very aware of the space that she takes up and how she lives within it. And so I just wanted to see like what was that like writing her as a character, just like kind of developing the idea of that.
So she's introduced in the second book of the series, Dragon Forge, is where she and Burke first appear. And so I had Burke the Machinist pretty well developed in my head that he was going to be this kind of low-tech, high-tech guy. He'd be kind of a steampunk, genius, working in this world to produce technology, but finding some way of using springs and cogs and steam power to come up with some pretty clever inventions. And when I was writing the first draft, Anza was his 12-year-old son. And the son was kind of my idiot character that you mentioned, is that he needed this kid here that the kid could ask questions where he can stop and give a little technological explanation for what he's doing. But then as I was writing the book, long before it came to publication, I was like, oh no, the timeline is wrong. This kid can't be 12 because I've already established that this first Dragon Rebellion took place 20 years ago. And so, if the kid was born after that rebellion fell, then got to be 19. I mean, I could push it out further, but I've kind of, it didn't make sense, if the kid was conceived in the aftermath of the fall of that city.
Right.
Then the kid had to be 19. So I was like, all right, well, he'll be a 19-year-old instead of a 12-year-old. And then I was like, this is a really man-heavy novel. I've got Anza, or not Anza. I had Jandra, as the woman, a girl raised by a dragon, and she's got access to this magic, and so she's an interesting character. But after that, the list of female characters falls off pretty steeply. There's the Valkyries, the female dragons. But for female human characters, there's Ziki, and there was Jandra, and so I was like, oh, well, instead of him having a 19-year-old son, he needs to have a 19-year-old daughter, and that will make a lot more then they can have a little gender balance to it. And then I wrote a scene where there's a battle going on, and one of the point of view character is like about to lose a fight against three opponents, and then Anza just like pops out of the shadows and slits silently cuts three throats, and then fades back into the night without ever saying a word.
Right.
And I was like, well, that was just damn cool. And what if she never speaks? And so, by the time I got out to the final draft, that I had it established that she never spoke, but she wasn't deaf, because she needed to be able to hear. But there's some dark sides to Anza, because basically she's been grown up, with this sign language that only her and her father can communicate, and so
really isolating.
In the course of Dragon Seed is, she's, is she her daughter? Is she his daughter, or is she his weapon? He has kind of raised her as a machine that he's been programming to kill dragons, and she's very, very good at it. But Dragon Seed does have a chapter called Machine Heart. Where
I was just about to say that.
Where it is where she's like really trying to figure out her own relationship with her father, and whether there's whether she's a person or this biological machine. I will again plugging for further books. Anza is like a headline character in Dragon's Gate Saga. She's she's a prominent figure in all three books, and just ratchets it up as far as the stuff that she winds up fighting every time.
You better order those books right now, Spencer.
I know. I'm getting so excited for them. I never knew there was a continuation to
the Dragon's
the
Gate
story.
hardcover is 50. Well, I can't remember how much I've priced it is. I'm selling at shows for $50 right now, but I think I have it priced at either 55 or 60 online. It's just getting, printing costs have just jumped up, and I'm like, if I price it at 50 within a year, I'm gonna have to jump it up. So I think
that's fair.
But yeah, so all the books of the Dragon's Gate Saga plus 3 novellas are all collected in the hardcover. You can also get it as an ebook. You can get it as a softcover. Softcover I know is $40, and or you can buy the individual books. The only format I haven't delved into yet is the Audible. Again, it just circumstances of life came up. But yeah, it's if if you liked Hansa and Shay, they are the primary, the team humanity continuing on into this further conflict between the dragons and the humans.
Very cool.
And Bitterwood's in there as well, but he's just a messed up character.
Yeah.
He's pretty dark and murdery in the first book, but in the first series. But he goes very dark very quickly in the second one. Or the second.
Oh, really? Okay, yeah. I guess I can't spoil anything. I'll have to ask you about that later. So kind of a quicker question is, I look at the various dragons. We have the sky dragons, which are kind of the intelligent and learned ones. But the sun dragons actually have a bigger sized brain. And so there's kind of a discussion near the beginning of the book where it's like, well, if they just applied themselves, and I'm curious if that's true, if the sun dragons applied themselves the same way that the sky dragons do, would they be like the leading dragon?
Probably not.
No.
For the same reason that blue whales and elephants have bigger brains than we do, but don't develop as well. So a lot of it comes down to body to brain mass, and so you can there's actually a formula where usually correlation the higher percentage of weight your brain takes up compared to the mass of your body, the more likely you are to be intelligent as far as a species, and so there are creatures with much larger brains than we have, but their body to brain ratio is lower than that for humans, where we have unusually big heads for an animal, and so the sun dragons kind of are the so I get a lot into evolution. So the sky dragons have been deliberately bred. They've been very careful about who mates with who, and they're really breeding for intelligence and a mental calmness, and really they're almost like the Vulcans of the dragon world, and there's just a guiding force. Your love is forbidden. You're supposed to you breed with who you're told to breed with, and you don't even have familiar families. You don't raise your own kids. They're all raised collectively,
right?
But the sun dragons, they're like, well, we're the 800-pound gorillas of the dragon world. We're giant. We can bite everyone else in half, and we'll just do what we want. And so their breeding has produced large, magnificent creatures that are a little bit reckless and not the most studious, but they're at the literal top of the food chain, because of their size. And it's not like they're idiots. They just don't have the refinement of the sky dragons, who are kind of find conquest, to be beneath them. So the sun dragons are like very enamored with battle and glory, and the sky dragons are far more, I would love to be known for my poetry one day.
Right. Yeah. Great.
I could go fight in this battle, or I could do an etching of a flower that will be viewed by students 1,000 years from now.
Right. That's great. And then before we go into spoilers, just kind of a look at Bitterwood as a character. He is someone that has been wronged by dragons, to say the least, and carries this just huge vengeance. He doesn't care if the dragon is good or if the dragon is bad. And we even get somebody in Dragon Seed saying there's dragons that are just people. They're not out to kill all the humans. They're just normal people in a city.
They care less about the people. They're just
yeah. And so I'm curious what kind of what you were going for when you started that character, and did you get to where you wanted to be?
Bitterwood's superpower is that he hates dragons.
Yeah.
And so Bitterwood's an anti-hero. He's not driven from some noble purpose. He's not out there trying to improve mankind. He's not driven by any sense of honor or integrity. His value is that he hates it when he hears dragons breathing, and he wants to make that noise stop.
Right.
Since you haven't read the first two books, I don't want to go deeply into his origin, but he's got reasons for having vengeance, this little vengeance stuff.
I mean, Dragonseed talks about like his family and how they were like burned up in the city and everything.
Yeah. And so he's bitter, and that's his thing. There's a point in the first novel where Chandra is just so pissed off, and like the reasonable people are alive are telling you gotta be forgiving, you gotta let go of the grievances and find a way. And then she winds up in a conversation with Bitterwood, and Bitterwood's like, never let go of your hate. Hate is the thing that will get you up out of bed in the morning, whenever you've lost everything and the world is at its darkest and you've got no energy left, you tap into that hate and it will get you out of the bed. Mm-hmm. And so Bitterwood is just this very dark character. By the point of Dragonseed, he's kind of in this redemption arc, mm-hmm. But he's still, just this very hyper competent killer, he's kind of the Batman of the series, but yeah, he has, in his further adventures, there's this illusion that I can put away this darkness and become just a simple farmer now and raise some kids. It's like, it's not that easy once you've been warped that badly by hate. It's going to find a way to come out. And my higher purpose here, I don't want to say that I have a message or something, but this was a book that was being written at a time when terrorism was a big thing. It's not like it's faded from today's world, but this was it was published after 9/11, and so much of it, if you're objective, you sit and you look at it, and the people that we're regarding as villains are held by other people as the heroes. And so I was kind of putting this into this dragon versus human conflict where the hero of the humans is like the biggest villain that has ever lived to the dragons. Mm-hmm. And just kind of exploring that dark morality where if you have enough people hating the other, then some of the worst people can rise to the top of that. And so Bitterwood, Bitterwood is someone you're supposed to feel a little conflicted about, mm-hmm. about liking him. I soften him with with his relationship with Jeremiah and Zeke. So mm-hmm. bringing some kids in does show that he's got a little father in him still. But yeah, I think is it Dragonseed? I'm getting confused now by which books. The Dragonseed is where he fights Hex and basically just goes completely berserk.
The Bitterwood and Hex fight in Dragonseed is like literally one of my favorite action scenes of all time. Yeah. Like, it is so cool.
Well, so what I do is anyone can write a book about where good guys fight bad guys and one side's a villain, but I've tried to create a world where you're kind of rooting for everybody. Everyone has some qualities that you like. So the biggest villains in this book So and basically when Hex and Bitterwood are fighting, you're kind of like, you don't want to see either of them, win this fight. And there's just a lot more stakes when you have characters that you care about in conflict. But like Volpine is the slave catcher general, who's
the bad guy,
breaking the thing, and yet he is just like patient and wise and really thinking things through.
Very Thrawn-like.
yeah but I enjoyed writing every scene that he's in. He's just smarter than than most of the rest of the cast. At one point he's talking about laying siege, and one of his soldiers just like, that siege is going to take months, and he's like, is the world running out of months?
Yes, I love this quote. Yeah, he says something like, last time I checked, the world isn't running out of months or days.
Yeah,
it's just like, ooh, that is such a good quote. Like, he's just very patient, very methodical. He's not rushing into anything. He knows that he has time.
So he's like the good, intellectual villain, that you're kind of like, you'd be a great person to have. You're a great dragon to have on our side. And then you have brutes like Sawface, who are just, barely coherent and just.
Yeah, Sawface is a cool.
Yeah, Sawface is a great. He was a ton of fun to write him as well. Awesome. And then of course the big meta villain over it all is the goddess Jazz, and even her, anytime I get into her character, I'm like, I love her dialogue. She's got a sense of humor, and she again is like this, just smarter than everyone else. And for me, the main tip over into villainy is being absolutely certain that you're right.
Yep.
And the heroes are always like, am I right? Is this the right path? Or is the villains have no hesitation or doubt about what it is they're after.
Right.
Do you think Spencer's crazy for just reading the third one and not the other two?
If you only had the third one.
He did only have the third one. That's fair. But
he's had time.
If I were to, because he told me to just read the third one, and I was like, I don't think I can do that. I think I need to read the series. I want to read them in order.
So the third one, the if you start with third one, so I make it accessible by using Shay as the framing character. You're picking up after some of the big events of the previous one, but so going into spoilers now, and bragging about my own writing, the best part of the third book is that I stick the landing twice. I've got the big confrontation in Atlantis, and I've got the big confrontation in Dragon Forge.
Yeah,
and there are probably 18 named characters running around at this point. And every single one of them has some major role to play in the resolution of the conflicts.
That's cool.
And so it's it's something that when I go back to the book, I'm like, man, this was a high degree of difficulty, because I get annoyed by novels that will have a supporting cast and then characters just disappear once
and they don't use them.
They don't use them. They were the filler, and so it's like, no. If I've dragged a pig along, for 3 books, I've got a pig for backstory. This pig is going to get in. He's going to have a role to play in that. Chekhov, had the loaded gun. If you've got a loaded gun at the first seed, you've got to fire it by the last seed. And say, well, I've got a very smart pig that has been with me for 3 books, and by God, he is going to.
Yeah.
Going to have his moment of glory.
Yep.
I love that they stuck wings on him. It's like, okay, that's good.
Yeah, no, it's. I always tell people, Bitterwood, it's such a grim series. It's very dark, very very high decapitation to character ratio. And when I go back, and it's like, oh my God, it's so funny. I've got
Yeah.
jokes, there's one big joke, every chapter something funny happens. So it's putting the wings on the pig was.
Yeah, that was great. That was
Sounds
great.
like a good one.
So we're doing spoilers now. We're all good with spoilers.
Yeah, spoil away.
Okay. Anybody who's watching, if you haven't read the book, then feel free to come back later after you have, or if you have read the book or don't mind spoilers, then continue on and join us.
And for what it's worth, my philosophy about spoilers is for great books, and I hate to call my book, a great book, but who goes into Lord of the Rings or
and doesn't know how it ends? Yeah,
it doesn't have some foresight to where it's going.
Yep.
If you don't know how Moby Dick ends, and you're just like, oh, don't tell me this is the ending of Moby Dick. It's like maybe you should.
Yeah.
So for me, spoilers are not, they spoil nothing. If it's a good, well-constructed book, I know the ending of most books that I pick up and read. I like knowing that that the author has successfully accomplished an ending, and I feel like I get spoilers. I get why some people are concerned about them, but it makes sense for like a murder mystery. But I don't feel like, I feel like that, it went from, spoilers in a specific genre, you're trying to avoid them, to like, you can't talk about the most important part of the books, for books that are sometimes, 20 years old.
Yeah. I have a very strict policy on spoilers for myself. I don't like having anything spoiled, but
I am the absolute opposite.
Yeah.
I'm exactly like what you said, James. I'm not
Yeah.
not concerned with spoilers.
Yeah.
They don't affect my reading of the book in any way, shape, or form.
And same with our other co-host Sam. She doesn't mind spoilers at all.
All right. Well, did you have a specific?
Sorry. Yes. So we were talking about the funny stuff, and I have a couple ones that are pretty funny. I think I love when Vance is eating the stew, and it's like really really hot, and he's like, "Oh my God!" Like the stew, and I'm forgetting his name. He hands him the what is that?
I think it might be Thorny in that scene.
Yeah. He hands him the jug of goom, and he's like, "Here, drink this. It'll help you." And he drinks it, and it's just as brutal as the stew. And his face goes from like, "Oh my God, it's so hot," to like puckering up, and then it kind of like all like comes down, and he looks at Burke. That's the name I was looking for. He looks at Burke, and he's like, "Have I done something to offend you?" It's so good. Just like, dude, you just gave me 2 things back to back that were like the worst things I've ever put in my mouth. Have I done something to upset you?
Vance is a very interesting character. Yeah, no, he kind of comes out of nowhere in that book.
Yeah.
He's plays a role in the book before, but he's just like this bit character. I just needed to have someone there to fight some dragons and give them a skywall bow, and I needed to give him a name, and that was it for his first appearance. And then it's just like he just was like, I happen to have an entire personality and a backstory, and an uncle with a shack in the woods that's going to play a part in the plot later on, and so so Vance was in some ways he's one of those idiot characters you're talking about, where he's good to explain. He's there to have stuff explained to you.
Yeah.
But he's also one of the like genuinely heroic characters. He's got good reason what he's doing. He's really, he's a, he doesn't have a ton of intellectual prowess behind him, but he can shoot a bow, and he's there to make the world a better place. By putting his being the one to put himself on the line, battling these beasts.
Yeah, and even with the initial like dragon seed, when he's like, well, I'm blind, how much worse could it possibly get?
Yeah.
And Burke is like, don't eat that dragon seed, like you don't know what it's gonna do to you. And he's like, well, we'll see. And he's like the first one to really like take the dragon seed and be like, no, it's healing my eyesight. Like, that's really cool. And then of course, like the part that always breaks my heart is at the end when he's like falling out of the sky, and Anza's like, I can either like try to save him or I can take the bow. And she's like diving after him, and at the last minute he's just got this look on his face like, take the bow. And she like goes down and like takes the bow and lets him fall. And it's just, oh man, it's so tragic. He's such a great character. I love him.
Yeah, someone, I hate to be, unfeeling about it, but someone from Team Human had to perish.
Sure. Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And so, of the cast I had available, there, I had some kids and I couldn't kill the kids, and so, I basically, it's like, all right, well, Vance, I've put a lot of goodwill. People like Vance, it's actually going to mean something, to them if he's someone who passes away.
Right. So the other note I have here is the dragons working with humans at the construction site, and I loved them all around the table, just like rolling out the plans, and you have the humans in front looking at it, and then the dragons like looking over their shoulder at the plans, and they're all like drinking cups of coffee or tea or whatever they have. And I've always just loved that image in my head, especially being a construction worker. I'm like, man, it would be so nice to have like a dragon that would just lift a big beam into place while I like nail it in. And
I will, a spoiler for the next series, the dragon human cooperation does not last long.
Well, that's what's so interesting about the Free City, is because they've all taken the dragon seed. And was that what was that about? Was there some sort of like mentally healing properties in the dragon seed as well that allowed them to cooperate better, or was that like Blastfit's like direct influence? Or
I think a lot of it is, I don't know that it's anything that specifically the dragon seed is warping your mind, but in war zones and times of conflict, you will frequently get these cult leaders out there with like, this peace message, and we're going to be different, and we're come live with us and give up your family and everything, and just come serve the goodness, serve the good cause. And so, I was kind of like making him this charismatic cult leader with a darker long-term agenda. So since you hadn't read the first two books, Blastfit is like, big villain for the first two books.
Yeah, I was definitely aware of who he was, and kind of, Dragon Seed went into like the history of him killing all the like the nest and all of that. And I found that really, and that's one of those things that I was talking about earlier, is like, even starting on the third book, there was more than enough information there for me, a brand new person to the series. I knew like almost everything I needed to know about him to understand the threat that he posed. and to understand why, especially given all the other characters' reactions to him. I understood that him being this peaceful cult leader was like a very odd thing. And my question for you with Blastfit is, had he obviously he had like one more trick up his sleeve and he kind of had that like final thing, but if he had just been left to his own devices, would he have just stayed this peaceful like settlement kind of dragon, or did he have like a bigger plan up his sleeve?
Yeah, no, I think ultimately, he was placing his ability to kill a lot of people and dragons, with just a thought, he can now kill. So I think he's that this is phase one of a plan to get, he's a self-styled god. He has no supernatural powers,
right?
And now he suddenly has some powers that seem supernatural, and I think he's just in it for the ego. And as long as people are praising him and telling him that he's the greatest thing ever, that he'll enjoy it. But ultimately, he's just too addicted to killing things to let it go for long. Yeah, he's a very he's genuinely wicked. There's a spoiler from the first book where he explains his motivation, and he's so one of the things about Blastfit is that he was the brother of the Dragon King, and whenever you have male sons of the king, they will battle each other, and the losers are either dead or they're castrated. So only the strongest in the lineage can reproduce. And so Blastfit was castrated, and he is since turned into this kind of philosopher of there's this creating life, that there's this universal life force, and people feel joy in spreading life and seeing and reproducing and seeing their offspring. And he says, if that is a force of nature, wasn't there also like a counter force to it? Isn't there joy to be found in ending that life and in ruining happiness? And so he's just got this very dark nature where he is just, a true sadist who just, enjoys, if there's someone else that's happy, his happiness is to make sure that they are miserable. And yet he's really, he's very honest and open about it. And becomes, very, the number of fan letters I get about Blastfit is just a really, I never expected it.
Weird.
I thought he was such a comically over the top villain that he was almost the villain and almost comic relief. Yet the number of when the book first came out, it was like there was like a Solaris forum. The publisher had a forum, and just the Team Blastfit people,
That's so funny. Everybody loves a bad boy.
Everybody loves the bad boy, and they were like, "You need to write a book, just just have Blastfit as the star." And so funny. So this is one of these things where just weird random things will come together. So the Mountain Goats are a band.
Yes, I love the Mountain Goats.
Yeah, so they released an album called "We Shall All Be Healed," and all the followers of Blastfit, that's their mantra: "We shall all be healed." That's what the Dragon is. And I put that in there because that was the album that had just been released, and "We Shall All Be Healed."
Oh wow!
Okay. So he's going to be a healing cult, and this will be the mantra. Because at the time, we were talking about looking up lyrics. I was like looking up, what does that phrase come from? "We shall all be healed." It must be, from some work of literature or some some religious creed, and I couldn't find it. And so I'm like, well, this can't just stay as the album, the title of this album. I'm going to work it all through the book. And so that I still, to this day, whenever I sign that book, I write "We Shall All Be Healed." And,
oh, wow. That's cool.
Yeah.
That's great. I love that.
And it's just, it's a very appealing message.
Right.
It's the basis, of the techno people, the technologists and the religious, is that, all of our troubles and there's a solution. There's, you're sick and there's something that can heal you.
Right.
And so, I just wanted to explore the seduction of that message and how it is dangerous. It's a very positive message, and yet both Burke and Ragnar are like this is bad. We don't want this message getting out there.
Well, maybe something I missed from not reading the first couple books is why did Van Dvorak's help him? Because he's doing the behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah. So Van Dvorak. So spoiler alert. Yeah. So Van Dvorak, since the first book, dead, and so there's this whole thing where to control their nanotech, they've got these skull caps, and they can be configured to other pieces of jewelry or something. But basically, it's this high-tech interface that's reading your brain waves and translating it into commands for the nanotech. And so, the plot line of the second book, Van Dvorak has died in the first book, and Jandra has this, his genie, the skull cap, and she puts it on, and suddenly, his ghost is basically speaking to her, because he's got some pre-recorded memories in there to kind of guide her, and then the underlying complications is that there's now a misplaced genie that no one has accounted for, and that's the one that that winds up in the hands of Blasphette, and that since Van Dvorak's in his final scene, it's kind of the Spock in I can't think of the name of the second Star Trek movie where he's dying, but he's on a planet where there's the resurrection, of the dead matter coming to life. And so Van Dvorak has commanded his nanotech to heal him as he's dying, and Jandra is trying to guide it and to cure his wounds, and then it fails and he slips away and she's dead. And so in the third book, it turns out that it just, it was just delayed. He wasn't really dead, but he comes back.
Right.
So I'm a big enough comic book geek that, that it's, just because you're dead doesn't mean you can't return.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
In a later scene, except Vance isn't coming back.
But was he originally in the first two books, was he sided with Blasphette, or why was he?
He's basically, now that he's back, Blasphette has basically resurrected him. One of the things about Van Dvorak is that he's kind of amoral. He's not really a good guy or a bad guy. He's kind of above it all. So he will see the king proposing to do something terrible, and it's just well, this is how the world works. He's not going to sully his hands with trying to change the wickedness of others. It's all just part of this grand playing out of history and the natural order of things. And
so he's just there for it.
He's just there. So he's not, and keep in mind, this is a book that, 15 years ago I wrote it, and I've been through it, but I don't think I've, actually read this book in 7 or 8 years. So, getting into his exact motivation, I could have something canonically in the book, but for
That's
me,
okay.
Part of his overall motivation was that he was never, he would not necessarily be, he's not like, I'm driven by such pure good and pure motives that, I'm going to instantly step in here to oppose Blasphette. And it's like,
right.
So, I've been dead and now I'm alive. Blasphette had something to do with this, so I'm going to play my cards close to my vest and hang out here.
Okay.
Until I get more information. And then, whenever he gets to Atlantis, he's suddenly, a much more heroic character, doing
right.
And Jazz is such an all-powerful character. Her mastery of nanotech and the technology is so far superior to Jandra or Vendeverix, and she's like, I'm the freaking goddess, and you just, all you know with magic is parlor tricks. And then he tricks her,
with a parlor trick,
parlor trick, and it's just like, this is he might not be at your level, but he's still,
he's crafty.
Yeah, he's crafty.
Yeah,
and these parlor tricks can, if you're a little too overconfident and you think you know how the woman gets sawed in half, might have you might get splattered with entrails if he's around.
Yeah. A couple quick quotes before we go into our final question is I always loved this quote: for a man to be truly great, he must struggle against monsters. And this was actually a quote that I read that out loud when I was in treatment, and everybody kind of clung on to it, and people were like writing it down and stuff, because it kind of promotes this idea that like in order for you to like really overcome your demons, like you have to go through some struggle with them. And when you're in treatment or jail or whatever else, it's like you don't necessarily want to be there. Some people are even like detoxing from various drugs and that kind of stuff, and so it's not like it's a struggle for sure, and nobody like feels good about being there, at least at first. This idea where it's like, in order for you in this situation to be like a truly great man or woman, in order to like do what you're supposed to do in life, you have to go through this time of struggle and really face your demons and face off against these things that you probably don't want to deal with or interact with. But that struggle is what, hardens, not hardens in like a bad way, but like just kind of forges that steel, and kind of it's like a trial by fire kind of thing.
It's both a bad thing and a good thing, So I was involved once with a woman who had a pretty traumatic history, of abuse from a previous time. And it was really, it was very much defining her and kept her, she just never could move forward in life. And so I thought about that a lot, because I had also had some pretty traumatic happenings in my own childhood. But there was a point in my life where I looked back and was like, I'm actually kind of glad that happened. That if the tragedies of the bad things hadn't happened to me, I just think it's possible that you can live your life, having been told, here's how the world works by, people that you trust, and you grow up and you don't have any reason to question them. You wind up living a life that someone else has defined as your values of what's good, what's evil, who your friends should be. And, I really think that if you ever want to be a fully formed, human being capable of making great art or doing anything other than just being a face in the crowd, you've got to have these dark moments that, on the verge of destroying you, that leave you with some scars. But, that scar tissue, becomes your toughness. It becomes your muscle. And, so everything I've lost in life, if I had a time machine, I could go back and try to undo it. I wouldn't do it. I would rather face the tragedy and come out with the treasures that I gained. Dragon Seed, actually, sorry, I just hit my computer. Dragon Seed actually has this very struggle with Burke when he has a chance to restore his leg. And he's takes
like,
the
it's
dragon,
made me who I am.
His scars, and he's got a scarred face where dragons have put parallel scars on his cheek, and he's like, I need these scars. These scars are me. These are if I when I look in the mirror and I see a face, I see this scarred face, and that is me. And if you took that away from me, I don't want to lose my trauma. My trauma is what makes me. And not everybody can get to that, to that stage. There are people who get who get caught up in, I'm not judging anybody. I don't view the people who can't escape from their trauma and can't build something, new, forge something new out of their struggles. I tell people that my favorite authors and recording artists are just this long list of overdoses and suicides. There's, and I don't blame or feel feel that there's some people who are just going to get consumed by their demons, but the fact that you stood up and you took the time to fight, is what that I find most heroic and admirable.
Absolutely. I love that. Burke also says in that moment, he's like, men died for these scars. Like, they're like, these are from like this battle where all these men died. He's like, I feel like if I got rid of them, I would, almost be doing a disservice to this moment in time and these people that fought with me. I thought that was really cool too.
Yeah, we're just, I hate to be the old man, ranting against modernity, but we've, as a species, we're getting, every trauma is now to be medicalized, or that if you feel sad or you feel depressed or dark, it's something to be diagnosed and treated. And it's like, this is, sometimes you got to be just flat out depressed for 10 years to come out the other side of it. I mean, you're depressed, for sometimes legit reasons. Sometimes you've been betrayed, by the people that you should have trusted the most. And, sometimes you have made just terrible fuck ups in life, and there are people possibly dead because of something you did or didn't do. And, just being able to say, well, that's you shouldn't feel sad, is, or you shouldn't be gloomy about this. It's like, no, if you need to feel gloomy, then feel fucking gloomy.
Right.
This is, we have these emotions. They're built into us for a reason. We evolved to feel these things and to fight them, or reject them as being unworthy of being felt, is going to lessen you as a person. Yeah.
That's great.
Heavy really fast.
No, it's awesome. I love this. I'm eating this up.
This book is, it's got some crazy stuff, but also you'll think about demons.
It's got these themes that I think about a lot. Like everything you just said is like, just from that one quote that Jazz says. She's talking about Bitterwood, and she's like, I needed him to struggle against monsters to become the great man that he is. And it's cool, not just with this book, but I think reading in general, it's such a beautiful thing because somebody can take a sentence like that and everything that we've just been talking about for the past 10 minutes or so. It's like you can get all of that from this one, like, well-crafted sentence, and I think that's really, really cool. The coolest thing about writing
comes in is called Struggle Against Monsters.
It is. Yep, it is. Last funny quote. This is Thorny, Hex, and Bitterwood. And Hex says, my friends call me Hex. And Thorny says, what do your enemies call you? And Bitterwood says, I call him Hex too. That one's made me laugh out loud every single time I've heard it. I call him Hex too.
Yes. Hex and Bitterwood. They're
such a good not team, but frenemies, I guess. Even in that, like, kind of epilogue type thing that Bitterwood is doing at the end. I really loved him flying down and them just having a chat. Was really, really cool. So wrapping up, let's talk about the next series, the Dragon's Gate series. Can you without spoiling too much, can you kind of tell us what leads us into that series? Is Vendivorax still in Atlantis? Is he continuing to do work there? Do we see any other familiar faces?
So, yes. So, Anza, Bitterwood, Vendivorax are all in here. Jandra, Shay, Burke plays a role, and the Nest Dragons, who have some role to play in the third book, but their superstar turd was in the second book, so the Nest is like this very heavily fortified, place where the female dragons all gather, and that's where the breeding is all done, and the drakes are all raised on this remote island, and it's surrounded by these guards called the Valkyries, and it's a very, very dangerous. No, they don't use human slaves. They were like, that's crazy to let a human slave come onto this island. It would be as a human to let a wolf guard their children, and
right.
And someone's like, oh, actually, the humans tamed wolves to guard their kids. But so anyway, a teaser here is that there's a mission for. So at the end of the book, a spoiler alert for the previous series, gunpowder has been introduced into the world, and right now humans have gunpowder and dragons don't. And so the Dragon's Gate, one of the plots that kicks it all off is that the dragons have stolen some of the guns and some of the gunpowder, and Burke knows that there's genius sky dragons who are going to figure it out, and they'll lose all their advantage that they have right now by having this firepower. And so it winds up with the samples are being stored in the nest, and it's just Bitterwood on a solo mission into the nest. It's I mentioned in Bitterwood, it gets dark very quickly, and there's a trail o bodies TM as he breaks into this heavily fortified home of the dragons. And things kind of spin off from there. The tagline on it is Dungeons, Dragons, Dinosaurs. Since this is set in a post-apocalyptic Earth, two of the dragons you don't meet in Dragon Seed, but they're from earlier in the series, find this human laboratory in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, where the military was trying to build a time machine, and this malfunctioning machine has now created a rift in time and space. Hijinks ensue, and dragons battle dinosaurs inside of a dungeon. This rip in time and space also is a gateway to parallel realities. And so over the course of the series, Bitterwood winds up confronting parallel Earth versions of himself. Different aspects of his personality: the ghost, the champion, and the huntsman. And
wow.
So
that's cool.
So I'm playing a lot. My comic book roots are coming through here.
Sure.
You got a book with Dungeons, Dragons, Dinosaurs as a tagline. If you're a level 29 nerd, you'll hit level 30 reading this book. It's a great blend of science fiction and fantasy. And then you don't have to read Dragon Apocalypse to read Dragonscape. But after I wrote Bitterwood, since there's no magic in the Bitterwood universe, it's like I need to pay tribute to my D&D roots. And so Dragon Apocalypse is in a purely magical universe. The sun is not a ball of gas. It's a dragon named Glorious that flies across the sky every day. This is a dungeon crawling, monster stabbing, treasure grabbing adventure.
That's right up my alley.
It's a lot of fun. It's full of humor. It's not game lit. I wrote it back. Came out like I was writing like in 2009. Game lit wasn't a thing, but it's definitely for people who are familiar with D&D, you'll hear the dice rolling in some of these
awesome
battle scenes. The party that goes and to hunt a dragon, it's got it's led by a knight and a cleric. There's a character called the Deceiver that is essentially a wizard, and his whole power is that he can tell lies and convince you to believe the lies, and he gets whatever the lies comes true. Cool. So all the different characters are just playing the classical D&D party roles. And so in the course of the series, there's some characters that have the ability to move between the abstract realms that surround the living world into the realms of the dead. And the realms of dreams. And so I wound up having some crossover action in Dragonscape where a couple of these dimension hopping characters wind up meeting some of the Bitterwood characters while they're trapped between dimensions. And so I have a little crossover action going on there. So
very cool.
It's all 11, all in all, it's 11 books and 4 novellas that all come together to form this close to 1.5 million words of coherent story.
Awesome. Do we get to see the character Atlantis again?
You get no, but you do get to go back to Atlantis. So the fate of Atlantis. Basically, I end the series with, we now have this island out there with 1 billion plus people who have been used to living with high tech, and now that tech has been ripped away from them, and what's going to happen to them. And so we find out what Vendeverex's solution is to this issue, and it's it definitely is every solution creates more problems, and so his solution has created some pretty bad problems. And the last book, the final scenes on Atlantis are really some of my favorite moments from the series. It's just the this you thought this was happening, but this is the double cross. Like, no, I knew you were going to double cross me. Here's the double cross.
That's awesome. That's great.
So
I love
it's
that.
like it's like every 4 paragraphs the turnout is changing, because you have all these characters who are at this point have this reputation for being very smart and thinking 3 steps ahead of the others, and you get to find out who is actually the character who has truly outthought them all.
That's great. That's
fantastic. Awesome.
And how much later is the new series? Does it pick up like right after Dragon Seed, or is it like
it picks up about 6 months afterwards?
Oh wow, okay.
So nice. So Hex has become the anti-king. He's kind of keeping anyone from establishing a new empire. The humans are, Burke is having trouble, he's very protective of his secrets, so he knows how to make gunpowder and he knows how to make the guns, but, people are already, there's a black market for these weapons that are getting into Dragon's hands, and he's, so he's being very close to the vest. He's got all his knowledge, but he doesn't want to share it because he can't trust anybody. And so that's creating resentment. So, so the whole human rebellion has got all these internal tensions. It's really, for people who haven't read, I read the previous series. Again, I try to make it to where you feel like you're jumping in and just starting off. I'm giving you the information that you need to read it, enjoy it. But if you have read it, it's definitely a continuation, a logical continuation of every triumph these characters have met in the previous books is now a new complication for them moving forward. Everybody is their own worst enemies in the end.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I will definitely pick it up and start reading that. I will hope for the day when it comes to Audible, but I will definitely read it physically as quickly as I possibly can.
If you want a signed copy, send me a message and we can talk.
Yes, I was going to ask you about that. I'm like, I would love to just order directly from you and get some signed copies or something. That'd be fantastic.
I've still got a copy of Bitterwood, the complete collection, that's signed by both me and the artist.
Oh, cool.
I drove up when I first got the copies in December. I drove up to Virginia to where the artist lives, and it was like 2 days before Christmas. We met in the parking lot of a diner at, it was the dead of night, and it was like 25 degrees with howling wind, and I opened up the back of my SUV and we signed, 3 or 4
in the middle of
in the middle of
oh my god, that's great.
And then and then I've already sold through, and I'm down to only two left that are signed.
Oh man, yeah.
So
I will
hook up with them to get more signed copies.
That's great. Yeah, I will get on that and order that through you. Then that's fantastic. All right, well, James Maxey, thank you so much for joining us. This has been kind of a dream come true for me today. Like I
can tell you were super excited. It was nice to see
that my book meant something to you at that time of life, and that you have found out that struggling with monsters is actually
it pays off, and yeah. And man, your book has definitely kept me company on many a terrible night. So
I certainly appreciate it. I made a joke earlier, that there's McDonald's, fry cooks who probably have a more steady income than professional authors do, but I sleep well at night, from having talked to enough people that I know that yes, there are dotted across the world. I've got fan letters from Japan before, that there are people who've read what I was saying and was like, oh, I get it. He gets me. This is something that needed to be said. And so you will find some nerdy shit in my books, but hopefully my mission as a writer is to try to make the world a better place with I hate to say the moral of the stories, but my stories do have something I want you to be thinking about. Those series.
Yeah, I think they have, and they've definitely made my world a better place. So thank you so much for writing these, and it's just been a huge part of my life. So.
All right. Well, I certainly appreciate it. I'm going to go watch a Marvel movie now, I think.
Awesome.
There you go.
All right.
Awesome.
All right, guys. Well, we are going to wrap it up there. Be sure to check the description for links to James's books and his Twitter. I'll put his website down there as well as our own links if you'd like to reach out to us or join our Patreon, where you can watch these episodes live as we record them, just like Nova was doing today. We'll have some more Dungeon Crawler Carl content coming up soon for you, if I can ever catch up on my backlog of editing, as well as our final episodes of the Dresden Files. We are bringing a 5-year episode series to a close this year, at least until the next one comes
Partial
out.
close.
Yeah, partial close. A close for now. But thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in the next one. Bye, everybody.